What does growth mean to you right now in this season of your life?
Well, growth, first of all, I'm 58 years old, so I'm just attempting to grow the right things and not the wrong things. If you go to the health area, there's a certain part of that where like I want to keep growing my brain
Yeah.
and keep the strength kind of, not minimizing too much,
Yeah.
but growing my ability to help people and companies in the community continue to, be, going toward the good things in life and not the bad things in life. So growth is critical. And
Mhm.
it's like this: you were either growing or dying.
Mhm.
And if we're not growing our capability to help the people around us, our families, our communities, these businesses we are both operating in, and these customers,
Mhm.
it kind of shrinks. You're either going one way or the other.
Mhm.
I would almost, I've heard it said a bunch of times, there is no neutral. There's
Yeah.
either forward or reverse.
Yeah.
And from that aspect, to the growth is kind of like, how do I keep doing that progressively in a way that where it's a balanced growth, not like a growth, because you talk about, business and wealth, health and relationships. Well, I actually think that there's a lot of intertwining things between all of those. If you only grow one, you're
Mhm.
probably starving the other, to
Mhm.
the detriment of that might be your family, it might be
Mhm.
your own health, it could be all kinds of things.
Welcome to the Perpetual Growth Podcast with Zach Palmer, the show where we explore the strategies, insights, and stories that empower you to grow your business, strengthen your relationships, and elevate your health. Because growth isn't just about what you achieve, it's about who you become along the way. Now, today I am thrilled to welcome Tad McIntosh. Tad is the president of HumCap, where they solve people problems through integrated human resources and recruiting solutions that serve and enhance their community. With decades of experience spanning from his time as captain in the U.S. Army to leading HR, recruiting, sales, and operations in high growth communities, Tad has established himself as a true thought leader. So if you're ready to maximize your HR and recruiting practices, join us today as we dive in and take another step on your journey to perpetual growth. Tad, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here today, my friend.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Zach. This is going to be a lot of fun. Look forward to it.
Absolutely. Me too. Me too. HR is always an interesting one. I love all the HR
Oh,
professionals I
oh
meet.
yeah, it can go a lot of directions.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I always like to start with this question, Tad, and it's largely because I think it reveals a lot about who someone really is. So,
Mhm.
for you, what does growth mean to you right now in this season of your life?
Well, growth, first of all, I'm 58 years old, so I'm just attempting to grow the right things and not the wrong things. If you go to the health area, there's a certain part of that where like I want to keep growing my brain
Yeah.
and keep the strength kind of, not minimizing too much,
Yeah.
but growing my ability to help people and companies in the community continue to, be, going toward the good things in life and not the bad things in life. So growth is critical. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like this: you were either growing or dying.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're not growing our capability to help the people around us, our families, our communities, these businesses we are both operating in, and these customers, it kind of shrinks. You're either going one way or the other. I would almost, I've heard it said a bunch of times, there is no neutral. There's
Yeah.
either forward or reverse.
Yeah.
And from that aspect, to the growth is kind of like, how do I keep doing that progressively in a way that where it's a balanced growth, not like a growth, because you talk about, business and wealth, health and relationships. Well, I actually think that there's a lot of intertwining things between all of those. And it's not,
Tremendous.
if you only grow one, you're
Mm-hmm.
probably starving the other, to
Mm-hmm.
the detriment of that might be your family, it might be
Mm-hmm.
your own health,
Mm-hmm.
it could be all kinds of things. So
Yeah.
anyway, well, that's a
Yeah.
good start there.
No, it is. I wholeheartedly agree. And largely, I mean, part of it comes from personal experience. I mean, I know, at least for myself, there was periods of time throughout life and business, and sometimes it was a little bit of a necessity, but where, I became so hyper fixated on success and building my business that I started to let other areas of my life become a bit detached. And I think that's a part of emotional intelligence and overall awareness is our willingness to take that step back, look at the overall wheel of life. And I mean, whether it be our health, wealth, spirituality, our interpersonal relationships, your one-to-one relationship with your significant other, friendships, and really be mindful and considerate of, am I out of balance? And I always like to think of it like a pendulum. When we swing out of range, which is going to happen probably time and again throughout our lives, it's the awareness that creates the opportunity for us to swing back and move closer to that center line, which will never be perfect. And I love something you said about neutral too, because one of the quotes that I frequently tell people, clients, is, if we're coasting, we're going downhill. So I don't think there is any neutral. Now, one thing that you said, you talked about growth for you is about constantly building the mind. And I know that you also are passionate about building your body, which I'm a firm believer that, our bodies in many contexts can be a direct reflection of our self-worth. I think they can also be a reflection of our ability to actually contribute. The healthier we are, the more energy that we have, and the greater our capacities to be able to show up in all of the areas of our life that we just discussed. But you also talk specifically about the mind. So for you, if you could tell the audience, Tad, like, what are some of the things that you do to continue growing and developing and building the muscle of the mind?
Okay, so I think to begin with, to grow that muscle, I think that assumes one thing, that we're lifelong learners. And if I was going to give any advice to any person I would be talking to in any frame, whether they be a kid in kindergarten or a person who is, retired and still wanting to be involved in the community, be a lifelong learner, because that sets the premise for that growth of the mind. Not just so if I'm a lifelong learner, it means I need to be continually expanding my capabilities, and the world continually is changing. So on that, as I'm always attempting to be growing my mind in different areas, and the mind in different areas is, some of those are business books. Some of those are personal books, like kind of think spiritual books, or think of how am I really connecting with what, my creator, which I would point up and say to my creator is connecting with my creator on both a spiritual and a mind. And even again, to get a little spiritual, I think it's Romans 12:1 and 2 that says, do not be conformed to this world, but, conform yourself to that, and by the renewing of the mind. So it's the renewing of that mind in both a spiritual basis, a learning basis. Like I'm re-listening to and rereading Good to Great, which is an old book by now.
Yeah.
But I'm re-listening this, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much really good content in here that I've kind of forgotten the emphasis of some of those things. And myself as a business leader and a founder of a company is saying, golly, I'm sharpening that saw, to use a Stephen Covey, term, to say, well, I didn't get the full meaning of the book the first and second times around. So here I am around number 3, continuing to try to grow in that and say, okay, I'm in a different place than I was then. And so that, to try to land the plane is, I think that growth comes from that, learning comes from it being a habit, right? Growth and learning being a habit that you're kind of continually doing, but also continually refining based on what's going on in your personal life, in your family life, your business life, your community life, your social life, because I think those are all part of a great life.
No, I wholeheartedly agree. I find it really interesting. I love that you point that out too, that it's not just growth and development in business, but across all areas of life, all contexts, all relationships. And one thing I'm always curious about, because I've heard varying philosophies on this, and I also like that you identified that it's never one and done. I like to think about it this way. It's like new level, new devil. And the challenges that I was facing a decade ago when I may have read a book like Good to Great, or any of countless others, versus the challenges I'm facing today, I'm going to have a different level of understanding. I'm going to hear and see different aspects of what the author is trying to deliver in the message, because of the fact that it's a new stage. So I'm going to have different things that you'll take away from it. So I think there's a lot of power in that repetition and revisiting some of those past learnings, because you're going to get something different from it. But one thing I'm curious about is where, and I'll use myself as an example. I'm very ADD. right? Extremely ADD. And to me, I believe it's a superpower. You know, I
I would
love to
just
have
call you energetic. You're
energetic. Yeah, I'll take
energetic.
that
I mean, we might spontaneously combust on this podcast through the energy, through the airwaves.
too.
Anyway,
Yeah.
keep
No,
going. Sorry for interrupting.
no. I love it. I love it. But that ADD I've always looked as a superpower. I mean, I didn't actually. I should not say that. It wasn't until I heard the saying that, you know, people with ADD, what they don't realize, it's like having a Ferrari engine, but with bicycle brakes. So when we can learn to upgrade the brakes, now you're operating with that Ferrari engine, you learn to slow down. And thankfully, with time, age, and wisdom, I've learned to manage it better, but also lean into it. And I think one of the things that's beautiful about ADD is, you know, because I get bored easily, so to speak, in certain environments and contexts, I really like to diversify my learnings. And I have times where I will go in and I really emphasize mastery, like I'm trying to master a certain skill, and I will, or new knowledge base, and, you know, I'll become hyper fixated on that thing. But much of the time, I'm kind of bouncing from one thing to the next. And then I might hit a period of need, or, you know, whatever the thing is, and I get hyper fixated on that particular subject matter, and I'm getting it from a variety of different resources. But for you, is there a particular strategy? And I'm always just curious about this because we're all so different. You know, is there a particular strategy? Do you go full immersion into one topic? Are you kind of, you know, vacillating between various topics based on what's fresh or just pops up and seems intriguing in the moment? I mean, is there a strategy for you, or is it, you know, consumption until you hit a tipping point, or what's it look like?
I think it's a couple things. One, and first of all, it's a great question. I'm not so much an all or nothing person and saying, you know, you know, like even behind me, I'll use an example here. The
Mhm.
green helmet behind me is an Army helmet, a Kevlar helmet. I served between the mid 80s and the mid 90s.
Mhm.
And the pink helmet is a volunteer helmet when I was at a volunteer event. And I love the juxtaposition between the green Army helmet and the pink helmet because they both involve service.
Yeah.
But I think you need different levels of different things consistently. So it almost is like braces. The reason braces work in our mouth is
Mhm.
because they're pulling on tension. So
Mhm.
there's a little bit of, I look at, you need to have a little bit of tension at all times between that, you know, to maintain balance. To have balance, there's tension.
Mhm.
And that tension is, we're all built, you know, as spiritual beings. We're all built as capable of learning all the time. We're all built for activity and outdoor activities. We talk about health. We're all built to use our minds, you know, flexibly and creatively. And work, I believe, is a gift from God. But the
Mhm.
difference is, and then we're all built to have kind of family and relationships. But when you think about those things, I think I just listed off 6 or 7 things. So there's always a tension
Yeah.
bet-
Yeah.
between those things. You can't be full on in one and still have anything else in the other because it totally depletes your capability to do it. So maybe I'm overbalanced at times, but I would say that I have a rhythm and a routine around saying I'm in every single day a spirit, body, mind growth person. Like
Mhm.
every single day, other than when I take a Sabbath and I say I really need to rest and just be like and just sit and rest.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay, which guys like you and me, rest is hard, probably.
Yeah.
At least I'm assuming for you because it is for me to be able to hit a full stop and
Yeah.
sit in the lazy boy,
Yeah.
you know, and not be overactive. But I think that there's that piece where it's, how am I feeding the spirit, and you know, and then how am I feeding the mind, and then and feeding the body, so that then I can go out and serve and work and create and do what we're created to do.
Mhm.
But even within that, that's within a series of relationships. So I think that takes the, you know, the thing, are you one and done and I'm all into this philosophy and then I switch philosophies? No, I've kind of had a lot of the same life philosophies for a long time. And I
Mhm.
think they've worked for me. And I think that they're in a level of both intensity and balance. And some of my intensity doesn't come from being overly intense in one area, but being moderately intense in kind of a lot of initiatives at the same time. Not that I don't have 484 goals.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
know, I have a number of goals for this quarter and this year. but it's in, 5 or 6 categories where you can say, how do I balance those categories of things that I want to be both being and doing and achieving kind of at the same time? And I do think it's in that, in that philosophy, I've got to be, and then know, and then do, and then achieve. So I
I
hope that
love that,
answers the
Tad.
question.
Oh, it does. It does. I mean, and actually, I mean, you expanded on a couple of other insights that I think are really powerful too. One, you talk about the power of habit, and it's just like anything. I mean, exercise for me is a habit, and it's one of those things where I feel like if I'm skipping a workout, there's a psychology to it. There's physiologically, I don't feel as well. I've conditioned myself where I work out at the end of the day. I'm one of those weirdos. But for me, it's a way for me to decompress, practice presence. It's actually a transitional period. It's wrap up the workday, work out right before the kids get home, and now I'm in a different state. So I'm setting my state and intentions. It becomes that conscious transition point where I go from work to self-care to now I get to focus on the family and the kids. But they're all habits. And part of my learning habit is actually paired with exercise, which I think this is another important thing too, is sometimes we tend to compartmentalize things to a degree where we can forget that there are opportunities for us to leverage time collaboratively. And what I mean by that is, every time I go out for a 3-mile walk, which is 5 days a week, for roughly 40 minutes, I'm listening to an audiobook or something along those lines and feeding my mind while I'm getting that exercise. And I can even listen to walking meditations while I'm doing a second portion of the exercise, be conditioning my unconscious mind. So, I mean, I love that you talk about the power habit. I like that you're talking about expanding it cross context because it's not just one thing. The tension thing is a really beautiful way to look at it. It's a little bit more eloquent, I think, than my thought of the pendulum, because you're absolutely right. I mean, we're being pulled. The more we focus on the one thing, the greater the strain on all the others. And that's a really great visual. So thank you for sharing that. Shifting gears a little bit, Tad, I would love if you would, share with the audience a little bit about your history. Take us through some of the major turning points, be it the milestones, the challenges, the successes, like whatever. Talk a bit about where you started in business and how it led to where you were today. And then we'll dive into a little bit more depth about your HR business and practices.
Got it. Okay, so I started in business. I started as a founder of a company in the amazing economy of 2001, and I'm joking about that. So we got our first retainer check for an outsourced recruiting project on September 10th, 2001.
Wow.
And my wife actually works for American Airlines and knows some of the flight attendants, unfortunately, involved with the events of 9/11. And I know people were, so we started as a brand new company, and I'd been an Army officer around the human capital and leadership things in the military, and then been both in the executive and technical search, and then an HR executive at startup companies, and had this idea of a fractional services company around human resources and recruiting. And knowing how that might work, from both a vision perspective as well as a practicality perspective. And so when we started, there were 3 employees. There was Tad Michael, and there was Tad Michael McIntosh. So there were 3 employees. One was a salesperson, the other was an HR person, the other was a recruiting person. And so my job when I started a company was to get enough business and get enough things going to where I could then replace one of the 3 of me, slowly but surely. And then eventually I become kind of a president of a company with 30 people, and not having, the 7 million hats of trying to be a solopreneur to getting to be kind of solopreneur to, to kind of entrepreneur to, kind of like a stable but yet growing business. So I think that the big deal is around that, as I was blessed to have the background of experience in both growing up as a young person and then a military person, and and going to West Point in that time frame to to getting out to being a young civilian, to be able to say, okay, I'm going to observe a lot of things around me, and I'm going to exude a spirit of service and an actual act of service in the positions I'm in. And then I'm going to be that learner that's thinking, okay, I think this is a new way to do things. So started in something, fractional services in the early 2000s was not a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's lots of them.
Mm-hmm.
And to be candid, I think we leveraged and grew the ideas of fractional services. But I can also look, and you talked about coasting earlier, where I can look at times where I took my foot off the brake, and I now look back at that and go, golly, I missed some opportunity because I didn't realize that there was more opportunity than what I had. And so there's, you know, thankful for where I am today, but it's a lot of business lessons and life lessons in being a person of service to other people and businesses in the community at the same time, where you can say, okay, we're living the mission now, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're pushing ourselves hard enough to be of a lot of value, a lot of service, and a lot of excellence, but we're not pushing ourselves to the point of where, the last 5 years, you've heard a lot about burnout, a lot about anxiety, a lot about the fears of things since COVID, which, I mean, I think we all have fears. Like, fear's real.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the last 5 years have increased the heightened awareness of a combination of the fears that a lot of us have from different generations, and honestly, the burnout we can expose through not having those good relational and spiritual habits
Mm-hmm.
that keep us grounded to some of the what I would espouse as the more important things.
Yeah.
Not it's not all about money, right?
Yeah.
It's the easiest way I can say that. But I don't know if that answered the question or if I just went off way into left
No,
field
it does.
there.
I love that, Chad. Like actually there's so much to unpack there. I've got 3 or 4 different questions or combination of questions and insights. One of the last things that you just said, I want to come back to several of these things, but about how, it sounds like what I hear is a lot of your foundation comes from, and what I mean by foundation, your groundedness, so to speak, comes from your relationships and your spirituality. And I want to come back to that. Another thing that you talked about that I think is really valuable and important is you talked about the different Tads. Tad Michael McIntosh, and that is so very insightful. And again, I want to come back to this one because I think as entrepreneurs in the early stages of business, it can get overwhelming, when we are wearing all the hats, and a lot of people don't know who, what, when, or where is appropriate to exchange, or when to hire, or what position to hire for first, and so on. So I want to talk about that. One thing I wanted to highlight too is you talked a little bit about that, and what I was hearing is when I'm looking at your hats in the upper left-hand corner of the screen right now, the Army hat and the pink hat. And what I heard from that is a little bit of identity. And you mentioned service. And the through line that I've seen all throughout your life, based on everything you've shared, is one of the continuums is coming from a place of servitude. And what I want to have you unpack and explore was, one, how did your time in the military contribute to who you are as a businessman, a man, a father, a husband, anything, all contexts of life today. Because you're not, and I mean this is a compliment, you're not what I envision is like the typical military guy, right? I don't see this high rigidity, the shaved head, the militant pounding you down, like dropping me 20 kind of thing, right?
Yeah. Well, there's a little bit still in there. You can get out of there. I joke with people, you can take somebody out of the Army, but sometimes you can't take the Army out of them. And even if you have some Marines, it's even a higher degree of like,
I had a teacher that was a Marine football coach too. I know exactly what you mean. But the point that I wanted to illustrate with that comment about service is sometimes when we hit these transitional points in life, you left the Army. A lot of people, or maybe it's a professional athlete and they're leaving sports, and it's like, what's next? Or maybe you get fired from a job. It doesn't matter what they graduate college, and all of a sudden we're hit with this pivotal point in time where we have to make a new decision. But what a lot of people end up doing is getting so married to the old identity of what they thought they should be, or where they would be at this point in life, or the thing that they thought they would be doing, that they can miss the big picture. And then what I mean by that for you is like that consistent through line of service. And oftentimes, even though you might have, and this is the royal you may have envisioned that you were going down a different path or track, what we will frequently see is we're still meeting that ultimate need, that ultimate desire, pursuing that ultimate underlying like drive of service. It just might be through a different vehicle than we anticipated. So what I want to come back to is, if you would talk to the audience a bit about your time in the military and how that contributed to who you are today and how you run your businesses and manage your life.
Absolutely. And I'm going to actually start one step before the military that has a
Please.
lot to do with why I did this. So I was in what used to be called Boy Scouts, which is now Scouts because it's co-ed now.
Yeah.
I'm still a big supporter of Scouts.
Yeah.
In the scouting movement, it's a global movement of character development, skill training, and leadership development. And I would even point to, before my military experience, was the scouting experience that led to the military experience. So, in the Scouts, is on my honor, I will do my best to do my duty to God and country, to obey the Scout law, to help other people at all times, to keep myself physically strong, mentally awake, and morally straight.
Yes.
Like, that's the Scout, and that's a scouting thing.
Mm-hmm.
And when you unpack that, like, people said, "Oh, why'd you join the military?" Well, my dad had been an immigrant to the United States of America, had joined the military, then, became a citizen, all that kind of good stuff. And then one of the things I grew up around, it was a lot around character development, intellectual and scholarly development and athletic development and in service development all the time. And that all kind of packed together. Like, I joke, and people said, "Oh, you went off to West Point, you went and joined the Army." And I joke with people, that was just Boy Scouts with guns. Like, and that sounds like a really funny thing, but like, one of my scoutmasters was a retired Army Sergeant Major. The other was a retired Marine Colonel. Mm-hmm. And it was like, you're 11 years old. And I remember those formative experiences of learning those skills, that character and leadership. And it's this wonderful program that takes you where you take a very, very, very young adult and you start shaping them with character and values and skills and leadership. And you have this outdoor learning lab of Scouts where you're going camping, or you have to go do this task, or you have this service project. So you're learning as a very young person to go do those. And so it was a very natural extension for me to go into the military. Like, I applied for ROTC scholarships, of all the different services, and I applied to different academies, and I ended up choosing West Point. And it was a great thing. But again, it goes back to a spirit of, I know that it's a little bit about the whole person, and it's a lot about service. So, because to me, both, when you think of the military and you think of, I think of scouting, because a lot of people don't know what it's really about. It's a combination of that well-rounded, got the tension and the rods between the different parts of my life that I can't do it all, but I got to make decisions about what I'm going to do. And I need to, if I want to be successful in being who I'm created to be, I've got to be kind of hitting some of these, doing some of these ways to continue to develop. And that pushed into West Point and the Army when I joined the Army, the motto was be all you can be, right? And they're back to be all you can be. They had some really bad mottos in between then and now. But excuse me for saying that. And I know the chief of staff.
Don't fix what ain't broke.
Well, exactly. I know the senior officer in the United States Army, and Randy George knows me humanly, so I could show pictures of that 4-star general and he and I as cadets at West Point. But the point is, it's about that totality of who you are. Mm-hmm. And the Army has a leadership philosophy of be, know, do. Like, you have to be the right things, and then you got to learn to know the right things, and you have to go do the right things. And everything about the military, when it's done well, is it starts from that concept of be, know, do for the service of our country, mm-hmm. and for the service of things that we hold, very near and dear to the heart, to be able to go sacrifice all the way to the hope. We don't like it when we have soldiers that have to pay the ultimate price, but it is part of the equation there. And I think the thing that translated very easily into a service business, so I got straight out of military service into a service business, was that both you're serving something, hopefully something bigger and better than what we are, mm-hmm. but also serving customers to where it's not about what are my intentions for your business. It's, hey, we're doing your HR and your talent acquisition. Okay, Mrs. Client, Mr. Client, what are your intentions for your business? What's your current situation now? How's that different than 60 days ago or 6 years ago, and how might that be different 60 days or 6 years in the future, to be able to put that in a schema where you can say, I can serve you, your business, and the people that are affected by your business well, because I'm thinking about what do I need to do for you to accomplish your mission. So there's a lot of, formative experiences that came from that military and that growing up that then translate really well into this economy of where we all have a customer.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to ask ourselves, who is that customer and what are their intentions, and how does what I'm doing and what I'm being and how I'm serving affecting them, hopefully positively, because if it's positive, it means that, oh boy, I'm doing a better than average job for them. And it means that they're probably going to stick with our service. And if they stick with our service, back to when I used the three names, I was, the salesperson, the service person, is that's one less customer I have to go sell if they're staying with us now, because I'm serving well. Because that's
you don't like turn and burn. I mean,
I don't.
I don't either.
Because I've had relationships that I've had for a lot of years.
Yeah.
And some of those relationships are just personal, and some of those are business ones where it's I jokingly say in the world of B2B is we need a lot of business friends.
Mm-hmm.
This is business, but you're my business friend because I can count on you for this.
Yeah.
And I know that you know me. I know that if I leave from company A and I go to company B, I don't have to reteach you who I am.
Yeah.
I just have to say I'm in company B now, and here's the intentions of this company, and here's the HR and talent acquisition needs we have in this company, so we can, continue that relationship, in just with a new mission of that customer. So hopefully that fits the.
Oh no, that was fantastic. I mean, to the point where I don't really want to try and unpack that anymore because it was so well said. I mean, thank you. I mean, there was multiple things that were really well said and identified. I guess building on that, I would love to hear you talk a little bit about that transitional period. As you left the military, what were some of and are getting ready to start your business, what were some of the emotional states that you went through? I love that you talk so much about the military, and you're probably framing it more positively, your experience more positively and holistically than just about anybody I've ever spoken to in the military. And it creates a certain depth of excitement and enthusiasm about it that I hadn't necessarily had in the past. So thank you for that perspective. But I love you talk about all the aspects of, everything from the scouts to the military and building character and values and, really a lens through which we can approach life. What was that experience like for you though, when you did leave the military? What were some of the emotional states, what you went through? How did you come to the decision? Did you know that you wanted to open an HR business as soon as you left? Was it something that fell in your lap? Like, what did that time in your life look like to you?
Okay. So when I left the military, first of all, so I went straight from the military into a executive and technical search company as just a private I was a recruiter one. And number one, I had come from military recruiting. So by the grace of God, I got assigned my last assignment and I went kicking and screaming into Army recruiting as a company commander. So I had 50 recruiters in those little shopping malls that you see and where you see, a military career center.
Mm-hmm.
We had 10 of those little, shops, if you will, with about 5 recruiters in each. And I was their captain over, and I had great non-commissioned officers, and they really did all the work. I was just, quote unquote, the guy to set the charge and to keep the candle, keep the fire burning, to help our military recruit enough great soldiers, leaders, doctors, nurses, all those other kind of things you need for the military to exist. So I went straight from that into executive and technical search world. So number one, I needed to learn the language of the business I was in. So the number one thing was take that character and discipline and work ethic and the brains that were God-given and saying, okay, I got to go learn a new skill, and I have to learn the language of how these tech and growth companies that were specifically in Texas, learn the language of what they were talking about, find the problems that they were willing to come to us at our company, because it's what's now Kforce. It was a $2 billion firm. It was much smaller when I joined, but I was in part of that growth phase of it. But number one, find out the language of those, learn the skills to be excellent again, to have capacity is the being, the knowing, and the doing, and to be able to quickly be able to transition from being somebody who manages and leads 50 recruiters to being the recruiter and saying, I got to learn this language, I got to learn these clients, I got to learn these things, and I've got to do a lot of things. So number one, it's back to that be, know, do. But to me, it was about trying to know it a little faster than the average bear out there as a recruiter, and doing a little more, because I knew that I would have.
How did you do that? How did you do that?
I mean, I hate to say it, but it was just more hours.
Okay.
It was just more hours. I mean, and I'm a decently quick learner in some ways, but the difference is I said, okay, I know what the standards are. I'm watching other people that are great around me. And I literally looked at the people that were doing the best and said, whatever they're doing, I'm going to go do that. If it takes me longer to put the inputs they're putting in, I'm going to take a longer time frame to put it the same inputs they're getting into it. Because if I can do that, and I wasn't intimidated, I was just kind of like, okay, they tie their shoelaces one shoe at a time. They put their pant legs on one pant leg at a time. They're not Superwoman or Superman, right? So it's about being able to just feel pretty good about myself from my being perspective, doing the knowing as fast as I can, and candidly overdoing the doing for a while till I got good at it. And then once you did that, I got promoted a couple times, and I was like a regional director in a fast amount of time. And it's not because I'm that special, but because I was used to being a leader and exhibiting leadership traits while becoming probably a little better at being a recruiter than a lot of people could get there. And then I got transitioned into leadership. And then once I was a regional leader, I had companies asking me, hey, we're going to go hire 50, 100, 200 of these tech engineers. We want you to be on our team. And I turned down offers multiple times until one, real breakout startup tech company was like, we really need you to come in here and do this. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try something new, because I'd been in that other firm for 5 years. I was like, I'm going to try something new. And I was not only the head of recruiting, I was the head of HR. Then again, I had to go with a good being, I had to learn skills again, and then to do skills from a broader perspective of within the business world. And so a lot of that is just approaching the tasks with a combination of confidence but humility, confident that I can learn, confident that I can contribute, but also knowing that I've got to come in as a lifelong learner, knowing that I probably don't know the language and the tasks as well as the people that are in the business, learn that, and then become a competent, doer. And then you're eventually going to become a leader. If you approach that with humility. And I love behind you, it says your humble and hustle thing.
Yep.
I was like, okay, if you're humble and you hustle, that solves a lot of problems right there in our world today. But then when I was at that company, the tech growth company, I saw how the needs changed from it was a 25-person company to a 75-person company to a 200-person company. And that's where I came up with the idea, because I saw that the HR needs were different at those things. And these companies, when they go through that rocket ship piece, it's in a very short period of time. And that's where I thought, well, if you could fractionalize that, you could say, well, I've got the team for the small set of needs, I've got the team for the medium set, and then the large set. And then by the end of the large set, they're getting bought by some other XYZ tech services firm. Right. So they're not going to have those needs. So it's building the business model. And that was the idea I had for HumCap, which is a fractional, emerging growth and middle market service firm, for fractionalizing HR, fractionalizing recruiting, and doing tech and executive search, because it's always changing. Like, I'm not, and I don't like get too bad here, but like we're in a time we're sitting here, it's April 15th, tax day. I hope everybody made their tax payments today. Whenever we're recording, everybody wrote their check or postmark it tonight by midnight. But the point is, we're in this time, April 15th, 2025, where there's a massive amount of change going on. Massive, right? And I think it's less change than whatever, but there's a massive amount of motions and tariffs and, everything else that's kind of like, it's like saying, okay, stabilize it back down to how am I going to be, know, do, and then lead. Right? Like it's about saying, how do I bring that back down to the base of who we are? And as much as things change, I know I'm 58 and I might be the old guy. As much as things change, they stay the same.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, I know there's always opportunity in adversity too. I mean, if we're asking better questions, we're going to get better answers. Instead of focusing on the problem, it's like, what's good in this? It's one of my favorite questions is what's good in this. And I also I mean, one thing you read my mind. Um, the way to accelerate success or becoming good at any one thing, I'm a firm believer in model the best, forget the rest. And if I think back to anything that I have done well throughout my life, at least that I learned and adopted quickly, it was almost always preceded by a period of time where I found a coach, a mentor, be it in real life or through a book or at events or whatever, or the guy next to me in the cubicle that was one of the top performers. And I would do everything I could to extract what made them great and start duplicating a lot of those habits, those practices, and then it becomes a part of who you are. And then when that merges with who you are as a person, that's when everything begins to evolve a lot more organically. And I think we hit that, parabolic growth point, which I think is so powerful. So I love that you're talking about those aspects of modeling and how that transition, because of the practices that you put in place and you carried those frameworks and belief systems throughout your life, it was a lot more fluid. Like I don't hear a lot of major, hiccups. Not to say that it was an easy journey by any stretch. Life never is, but I think there's a greater element of consistency because of the way that you approached and tackled so many of those things. Now, I want to come back to your business, but we've only got a few minutes left here on the podcast. So there's one thing I want to explore before we come back to your business, which is just really quick talking about the three Tads, because this is so important for the audience to hear. Because again, it's so easy to get overwhelmed when we are doing all the things in the earlier stages of business. So the fact that you were able to consciously compartmentalize and put these different hats on, or have these different Tads that's responsible for these different roles, and then systematically replace them is so powerful. It also gives us a pseudo North Star, or maybe multiple North Stars. So there's points that we're aiming toward. For you, what was the first role you wanted or found that was most appropriate for you to replace, and why, as you're on that track to president?
Okay. Well, the first role that I found fastest to replace was the recruitment side, because I knew what good looked like and I knew I could hire that out fast. And I knew some of the people who were there.
Mm.
It's just like when I deal with a company when they're a smaller business, I'm like, hey, when you're done, if you don't have any more friends or family to hire,
Yeah.
that's when you need to hire us as your recruiters, because you don't have any other people that you know that could go and do that task, because they
Yeah.
used to do it with you at your old firm. So
Yeah.
the first one was the recruiting side of hiring in the first recruiter at HumCap. And then the second was the first HR professional that we hired on a full-time basis. Those are the
Yeah.
first two things. And to be candid, I'm still working my way out of a sales and marketing leader job at HumCap. So I'm
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
not a solopreneur anymore, but I'm still highly involved in our sales, marketing, customer facing activities now.
Hmm.
But it was easier to replace things that I knew what good looked like, because it was easier to manage.
Hmm.
And then significantly said, because part of what I think we all are given, capabilities that are the superpowers,
Yeah. Yes.
right? And I think maybe one of my superpowers is that persistence across multiple lanes of saying I'm persisting on my my spiritual being. I'm persisting on my family relationships. I'm persisting on my growing business skills. I'm persisting on these things. But I think that the piece there is knowing where our superpowers are and saying you probably ought to stay in your superpower for a while, if not forever. And then
Hmm.
secondly, you bring a person in that it's one of two things: a place where you know that you know what good looks like, or B, it's your biggest problem.
Hmm.
It's the biggest area where you're nowhere near being capable, and you say on something that counterbalances you that really super well. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you see really good founding, like if you said to me, one of the things that's interesting about growth businesses is when you find a lot of business partnerships, um, most of them are imbalanced partnerships and most of them are not really symbiotic. So like if you
Mm-hmm.
look at like the yin and the yang thing where it's like the yin and the yang, if you're in a business where you're like, hey, I'm highly operationally capable, well, maybe I need a highly sales capable person as my yang. Or if
Mm-hmm.
you're a salesperson, you need that operations person to make that circle, that ball that will roll and not,
Mm-hmm.
and not something that it's, trying to roll you know, a square peg that
Yeah, right.
doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. I mean, there's a few really critical insights there too, because one, I love that, it's not like the strategy wasn't necessarily like, okay, I'm going for the salesperson first or the low hanging fruit. And what a lot of entrepreneurs do is they have a tendency to hang on for dear life to the thing they know, not necessarily the thing that they excel at. And you actually hired for those roles first, which to me is a mark of a great leader because what you're indirectly saying is that I know I can, one, find the right person, but two, also train up that person and build them up and develop them to really take full responsibility over that role. And I think that's wise because a lot of people do the exact opposite. So really brilliant mark of leadership. And I love that ideology and approach. Just for the sake of time, I want to make sure that we give some time to really talk a little bit about, if you just take a few minutes and talk, for HR and recruiting, like who are your actually what might be a really great way to illustrate this is if you're looking at clients and they're like they think they might be on the verge of needing some fractional HR work or recruiting, you know, who's a good fit? What are some of the questions that they should be asking in advance of reaching out to you? How might a client know or determine, okay, I really need to start thinking about these either whether it be now or for in the near term? What are some, tips,
Okay,
strategies,
so
insights?
so the first tip is when you're a small business, the Society for Human Resources Management in America says you need one HR person for about every 100 to 200 employees. So the problem with that equation is most of American businesses are less than 100 employees. So
Right.
that was the whole basis, or like, okay, well, that opts out of most 75% of the businesses in America don't need HR. No,
Yeah.
100% of businesses need HR. The
Yeah.
difference is you just don't need a full-time HR person.
Yes.
So we
Yeah.
go and say, so if you're sitting there thinking about, hey, I'm a 60-person manufacturing firm, you probably need somewhere between, 30% and 60% of some person's time doing those things. So that's anywhere from 600 hours a year to 1,200 hours a year of somebody's doing the right HR things for my 60-person manufacturing firm to be being best in class around HR so that the business can, thrive.
Hmm.
And then the second tip is don't think of HR as in, oh my God, I just have to go do this HR so that I can comply with governmental laws. Think of that the best companies in the world
Yeah.
are still people centric.
Hmm.
You're doing HR for business sake.
Hmm.
If you like, because some people leave and start companies because they hated HR, right?
Right.
They could, oh my God, HR always annoyed me. Of course it did. If you're an entrepreneurial person, it probably did,
Yeah.
right? But the difference is thinking about it differently to say, okay, I had this great idea, this new widget I was going to manufacture. Now I'm 60 people and HR is killing me. Thinking, what's the appropriate amount of HR time I need so that I can have an outsourced partner that can map my HR strategy to my business strategy? Because every business has a different strategy. Every business has different tactics. Even if you look at two identical companies that manufacture the same product, offer the same service, have the same deliverable, how
Hmm.
they got there is going to be different because the foundational principles of that firm are different and the foundational business methodologies might be different even though they might be in the same industry. So it's a
Hmm.
combination of saying think everybody needs some HR,
Hmm.
B, how much HR do I need, and C, how do I map I look at my business strategy and map, a complementary HR strategy and tactics so that the HR is not the thing that's, keeping you back. because that's the kind of companies we run into is frustrated business owners, frustrated CFOs, frustrated controllers, frustrated VP of operations, frustrated tech leaders, that it's the HR piece that they didn't think about 3-6 months ago. And all of a sudden they're in a bad place and they can't deliver the results to their customers. So that's what I always say is don't think about HR as, oh my God, I'm going to stay away from HR as long as I can. Well, if you have customers, well, you have a business idea. Okay.
Well,
you have a
and
business
your team is a
operation.
customer too, right?
Your team is a customer too. So how do you help the human capital work well together so it works, in concert so that you can be, the company that's winning, not the company that's losing deals. So that's how I would look at it.
I love that, Tad. I mean, I mean, fundamentally, the number one thing I love and appreciate you said is, if you're looking at HR as like a requirement, then you're already looking at it wrong. You've already lost the game. It's like we've got to really take a step back and holistically look at why is HR important and how does having a properly implemented HR infrastructure, be it 1 or 10 people, appropriately serve both our team internally and the customers that we are there to serve externally. So that's a beautiful mindset. Tad, I got to thank you. I got to thank our audience for spending all of your time with us on the Perpetual Growth Podcast today. A big shout out to you, Tad, for bringing so much value to today's conversation. Where can our listeners either connect with you or learn more about what you're working on, or if they're interested in, either starting, revamping, expanding their HR program, where's the best place to get in touch?
So first of all, I'm on LinkedIn. Tad McIntosh at HumCap, and you can find, it's HumCap is HUMCAP, short for human capital, to make that clear. The second thing is, I know this sounds funny, but it's Perpetual Growth. I'm both in Strava. I'm Tad McIntosh on Strava. You can see my workout stuff here that I do.
Awesome.
And you can look at YouVersion, the Bible app. You can see what I'm, because it's kind of like that. I wish there was one growth app that I had that I could say, find out, here's all my learning on this growth app where we can share in community wise. But yeah, look at LinkedIn, look at Strava, look at YouVersion, and I'm on all those 3 places, and I'm pretty public in those things, and enjoy supporting and encouraging each other in that growth mindset, being lifelong learners, and helping things to be a little better today, hopefully a lot better tomorrow than for all of us.
Right. No, that's amazing. Well, guys, we'll make sure that we have the links so you can reach out and connect with Tad in the show notes. Again, it's Tad McIntosh from Texas, not the oil refinery executive, but the HR and recruiting executive, just to make sure we keep those lines clear. Now, if this episode sparks something for you, don't keep it to yourself. Be sure to share it, subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, and help us reach even more people on their growth journey. And remember, growth doesn't happen by chance, it happens by choice. We'll see y'all next time.